And now we try to especially develop partner schools outside the European Union. So we are really interested in.
Tell about. I mean, you were in Palestine.
Yeah, we also in Palestine and in Jerusalem we have partner schools. Yeah, so we're really open to that.
سيارة باشو قالت لي يجيبك اللي هو بابك يعني حسب خديا بدت ديفلوشوني وكاتو وهما هنجير كان شو كل بلد قال فيتنام كارا داس بيكرو كو أبي أولغورنا خطابيان بكان وفي سادميجي هاول كتان كل دربي ولاتن أوروبي أمان برنامج عجيبة كان وهذا تذكر فلسطين يجي برنامج رسالة وجا حزت كاتم يجي أكر ريكا كم برا بيش بربان بيش
So thanks a lot for having us, and we are here the whole week. So I mean, there's a lot of time to discuss the lunches and dinners. So I'm sorry for the Swedish government and their behavior against the Kurds at the moment, but we hope that will change. Thanks a lot. Adapted for film. It was what happened back in the old times as well. I mean, you took a well-known story and made a film out of it.
من عندك كارتة كمان عندك برنامج سينمائي دل كتابة كي قام بيتر خازيار خالكي سهل كو قال بيتا فلوتن أو تتعلم شغلتن كو بشتاتنا بيتا برنامج سينمائي ويجو بيجي هم جوا كلنا أو كتابة برنا أو رومان برنا كو خالكي قالك دخازي سهل.
And commercially, you can sell it on some of a name of a writer.
ولانه وقتی دهاته بازرگانی جیبو کار سینمایی هم جاراخته نوع نویسر و نوع رومانی تا در آماده کردن وقتی پاپشتی و کمپیوتر خواسته خرکی سرهمید. So his third question is about the technological impact on the Swedish cinema and the development of the technology. How was the impact on the cinema?
When we talk about the very making of the films or the screening of films or
Onsa درباره بسیارات ایسیه وقتی کارتی که ما تکنولوژی های هست نام سینما
سیزده دامن بپیشتی انترنت و ستلایت و سوشال میدیا پیدا بگوسانه هی خکشید فیلمی ببینید کارتی که صنعت و فیلم های گریه بیره فیلم سازی یعنی
he specified on like the latest technology when there is like internet and like mobile phones or to watch the movies. So is this kind of audience that they are using this kind of technology to see the movies, it influenced the production and the cinema in the Swedish?
Maybe you would be better equipped to answer.
I mean, of course, I mean, as we said, we have another, the directors have another history today, and they haven't, I mean, in the old days, many directors, they started by sweeping the floor of a studio, and then they went up in the career and became directors. Nowadays, I mean, every kid has a mobile phone, and I mean, they wanted to make films directly. So of course, the technology has created a new aesthetics. I mean, a kid today, they cannot see a film that is 20 years old because it's too slow for them. I mean, the TikTok area, I mean, makes it difficult for them to see an old film. It's because the tempo is different. But I would say, you said that your grandmother never saw. Yes, she saw one film, but Sweden, in the heydays when the cinema was the thing, there were, I think, 1,500 cinemas in Sweden, in a population of, at that time, 7-8 million people. So there was a cinema in every small village. I mean, maybe they had just showed cinemas on once or twice a week, but there was a cinema. All these labor organizations or other organizations, they had their cinemas. So there were a lot of cinemas in Sweden.
But the first feature-long film made on mobile camera in Sweden, I remember that was 10 years ago already. So today, I mean, it's totally possible, and that is also one of the revolutions with I'm working at an art school, and I see how available the technology is for everyone. You have a laptop, you have a tripod, and you have a camera, and then you have a film crew. You can make a film. So of course that is a revolution.
But it's also boring. They don't have any clue about lighting or whatever.
Yeah, from your perspective.
Yeah.
بيجي طلبة كاريكارية كذا مثلا أبو وزمان برد وقت بدأت أشوف فيلم صاص وده هنا رأيت وندس فيك استوديو ده عرض بقش كده الكارت كده ويجي هيك دوي كشو هوا ده فير بنكاري وهيدي وقت بيش تخستن داشن ده هنا مكان البته نوكا أف تكنولوجيا عندك كاستين هم موبايل دستيتو وكار در هناره کی هر و آمریک بیکو و رکداچی تو وصا عالمی بونمونا بري 10 ساله فيلمك في موبايل هذا شكل كسر در هناره كم فيلمك دريش شكل يبتني بكلمة عامرة موبايل و شاخل وقت سينما بشكلی توسط دمیده تقریبا 500 سینما ها تا آوا کردن نفسی سوئدی دار داده و خلق تقریبا 7 میلیون کس بود. لما سینما همه جهات دارو خلق یعنی چنا با هفته جای کن 2 جا سالانه فیلمات کرد. لما کاریگری ها اکید و دسته همی یاده هایی نوکیجی جبلی کو بینر آن تماشاوان سعکتا وان آمیرا کار بینی کو گهشتنا سینمایی تکنولوژی دسته سینما کار داشته هایی کو لابتوب کارتینن و همی آمیر تکنولوژی تشکتی و البته دوی رخیبجی کاریگری هایی.
But of course, I mean the new technology and is important. I mean. These pictures we got from video from cameras in Mariupol or whatever. I mean, we can at the same time as things are happening, we can get the pictures. I mean, on the net to us. I mean, of course, technology is a big advantage to see the world. But I mean, still, I think it's important that we have. People that is educated in filmmaking now. I mean the media know how to I mean how to use the camera, how to write a screenplay. I mean it's there are different functions of film. I mean this is the documentary to educate us about the world. And make us see how other people live and have it, but also the old traditional way of making something, develop the real life to make it to a higher stage in a screenplay. It's we need both.
هنجرا سيرلاني تكنولوجيا وأبيش كافنا والمنا نكاف وين بوما جهنا ماش استيراد دربي أيدي حصار دا أمانة هر بركات تكنولوجيا عن تمشين ببيني بادي من جانونا البته أماش خودی که تکنولوژی نی بو برنامه ما مثلا موبایل که وان کاری که سینمایی بچه که بذار کردن و کی روحیت وقتی بره بله دو بیاوی جدا جی مثلا بحث این دکون دکومنتاری او کاری کو ما تیگشنا ما بو جهان میلیه و تیگشنا باش مروایتیه و تو دکومنتار ام مفایجه بینیم و هر بلجی لای بیجی و فیلم سازی بیجی یا گریم که وقت بیروکا کتی تو سر آباد بیتو اخیر کاری جوان کتی چه
film as art or as a functional tool? I mean, it's different function.
Film
as art or as a functional tool is we need are different things.
فيلم وكي هنا أنجي أميرك و أم كاربي دو بوري جدا.
Pick one of them.
Magnus بحث برادر السويدي سياسة رابطة كان وارد أي مجرد المدري عندك كسنة فارسية وايد شيء مقنعة شيء كأنه مزاوجة بنجابي.
Regarding your, when you decide that you got 3 cans women and 2 of them were refugees, for example.
Not refugees, immigrants.
Immigrants, I mean. So, is there any Kurdish who are migrant to Sweden and have made like a good movies or good cinema work?
Yeah, first of all, the impact of Kurdish artists, intellectuals, and writers is very strong in Sweden in general. Sweden became a little bit of a center for Kurdish literature. There is a fantastic Kurdish library. There are many very well-known public figures in the public life in Sweden. There are comedians, actors, writers, and there are a few filmmakers. Maybe you would be better.
We had one winner here the other year, Roger Sekase, who is from Rojava.
السويدي خاركين بوش كردستان لكن قالكن وناف والله جي أكتر هنا بياوي جدا جي مثلا أجيت هني نفيسات هني وكتب معناه هني قالك كتب الكردي لهنا وكاسك يكو برنيوس روجا بايا. What is the name of?
Roger Sekars, I think.
Roger Sekars. No, كاسي يكوش روجا كردستاني شوية سويدي.
And I think you have Karzan Kadir, Rojda Şeker, so it's from Baku.
And we have a producer of a Norwegian Kurdish.
هلا كسي بيجي هلا وكي Karzan Kadir وهلا كسي بيجي بروجيسيال هم جرا كسك هبوك كوجبر يعني ج نمسا شو سويد أبكسيا كارتكلنا كأوهوليجي هبو لسر سينما لسر دميدا كو هاجو نابيبي كريتيكا فيلم ماجي بكر يعني نبيسال كو رحنا قليه بكر وقالنا دي داجي ج بيربو شنيت سياسي جي رامياري ينزيد بو حزب السوشيال ديمقراط ودوي فترة دا حكومة دابون شيا كون دا ريفورمات فيلم داوكاتو ولاين العبوري بابش ديا تشكل دون منا لما تكيت تاتنا فروتن وانا دهش صادي ج و قريبتي كتير زمران نبابو كارت سينماي ولكن كو سينما بيتر بين أولي بيش كبي وهم جرا ستوكهولمي أبايا كاجلك يا جوانو يا باش هذا أبا كده و هستكي جلك رومانتيك دف سينما كارا وخلكي كوتشنا سينما يجيبو وكارتي كنا كاجلك أنمي هبو وأباهي وشيوازي وستايل. Before
going on with the Swedish scene, we leave the Swedish scene for just a few moments to Britain and France. We have a female name, Mai Zetterling.
Mai Zetterling, yeah. She was, maybe, now there's a revival about the work by Mai Zetterling. And I think we haven't fully recognized the importance of her work. But she was both an actress and a director. And she was also a very international character in the sense that she was in international production. And most of the films that are famous today are maybe from the 70s or rather than, or even in the 80s she made films.
Yeah, in the 60s she was more known as an actress.
Yeah.
But she is one of the big female names. We need to mention them.
Let him.
She was French or UK?
Swedish.
But she was working in France and UK.
Akterek dest به کاری که سال 60 اکتری دیگر لزیفان بو مایا ستیلن سویدی بو برای کار دیگر سینمای دیجیتالی دولت یعنی بریتانیا و فرانسه سال 70 و 80 داشتی گرد برهم و برای پاش اینا اوی کار دست کار در اینان ایجی کرد و برمیاز بو همین جیهانیجی هاتن ناس کردن و بسر همه داد بتا گرد کاری توی نهادنا یعنی باش ممکنه اگر جدی نگردم و سردمی جارا کردی توی جیمونی سر کاری توی دی نکردن و یعنی کنه بیوی تیتا نوجوات دارونجی گروپ سینمایی.
Maybe you can say something about TV and in the 60s.
60s and the 70s, maybe we talked about, me and Freddy talked about the importance of Swedish television at the time. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and at that time one aspect was that characters like Ingmar Bergman, he made a lot of works for Swedish television, and as a kid at the time, if you put on the television, you could see Ingmar Bergman's very explicit films at daytime, which was quite shocking for a small kid. And today we wonder about this very liberal time. It was more liberal time than today, in a sense that Bergman's very explicit works, like scenes from a marriage, were shown to very normal families at home.
But you also, we talked about...
Yeah, we can let him take that.
السويدي صار شستاف احتياجي أكثر جنك أكثر هو إنمار بيرمان يا سر تي في كارين بيت بلافت بون برای گلک یا جریء بو یا جان نطرز بو مادر ما کارن توی آنجی وقتی درد کت نجارا ناف خیزانا دا مثلا ایدی همون مشهد همونیت تایدت جنمیران او پیراد بو نوما آنچین بیشین کو کارتی کرنه که بو سر آزادی و تاکا کسی کو بیشین نوی اکثر انده رو کو اقلی من اینها دفوانا یا یعنی شوک گوچه بو بده رو گردن بینی نوان دیمانان تلویزیونی و سینمایی که جوره که آزادیه و گل دیگرش نواری هنری بو سینما.
Yeah, and the other aspect was that Swedish television employed filmmakers. They had a full-time contract to make films. There was a lot of people working in the house of the Swedish television, and they had a really good freelance contract with independent filmmakers as well. So those aspects made Swedish television as a really good hub for developing documentary. So there's a very good archive of documentary from the period of time. We have a lot of films from colonial struggle in Africa, for instance, where freelancers were sent to Africa to work with the gorilla for half a year. So there's a huge resource in terms of archive from that period of time.
Yes, this was the period of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
ساعتها كده شو قالك برفله وقالك كارماندين فول تايم يعني كو ما وين دريش كار كان كاتنا كاري وقالك فريلانسي هاد تشيبون كان فريلانسي وبس هذا ميدا دوكيومنتاريجي قالك كارنا كده والمنابك قالك برشاف أول وقت صار كل كولونياليزمات كل أفريقيا هذا كلام وقالك دوشني في صال سينما كارت قال أفكاسين شكدار ناف أفريقيا كار كلام.
If the 60s has seen the filmmakers supported by the establishment. And now we come to the end of the 60s and the 68 movement in Europe, you know. And it's also happened in Sweden that the filmmakers and the Film Institute, they clashed. I mean, if they had been happy with Harry Schein before, it was now a total lockdown between them. But one of the oppositional young directors was Roy Andersson, whom his debut is screened here, a Swedish love story, wonderful film from the beginning of the 70s. Try to see it.
أو كان موان وقت الدوكيومنتاري في رجالك وكارتكنها وكو أرشيفة كمازن شيء وأو سهل بوقت شارع فيتنام شيء وجيهان بيتر سارقال هند بونا وانا كسب دوكيومنتاري كتير. دول شيستاد حتى شيستادش كي وقت دما أو وكي بيجين مومنتا كان جي غورانكاريه كده أوروبا دا شيء بو سويتشي هم جربي باش نبوشن ليه بجرب ما قالك غورانكاري بقواديتن وسردمه كده پیمانگه و الانستیتوت فیلمی فیلم سازاجی هم جرا ناکوکی و نجتم و نابراورده البته ولی که کندک رابطین جداجی چیرن و ایک نوی رین آندرسون سال هفته دا فیلم که چیکی دی سوید love story.
Swedish love story.
Swedish love story. It will be present here in the...
Yeah.
أوجي بجدار فيلم فيستيفال دوكي يبيدانكو نماشا كان يرجعنا فيلمجي.
But his second film, he struggled very much to do Gilead, and it was a disaster. I mean, when it comes to the audience, so he had to turn into something else. For 20 years, he made commercials. It took 20 years for him to come back to regular filmmaking.
أو فيلم كدي هبو نافيجيليا راستي يعني كارتي كنا كمازن جوا كده كر البته شوازه که تایوان بودی که در جبر دا با ماوی 20 سالا کار کرده بازرگانی دا کرد و پشتی 20 سال از چه میزابی با چکل نافل مجال کنید.
Yeah, I mean, today when Roy Andersson is known for his very particular style of filming with fixed tableaus and panoramic views, everything built in studio. With his own, he doesn't really use professional actors, but amateurs that he shows by the look of the character.
روی ناس شی کاری توی تایبانمندیه که بود که ناف استودیو دا فیلمت خوبرانتینان تابلوین جهگیر دادنان یت و پانوراما و اکترین پروفیشنال کارنتینان اما خرکه کتینا و ساعت کروانا سر شکلی بریارتا و کی چتنا فیلمی دا و اکترین پروفیشنال بجارتن.
And actually this aesthetics, Roy Andersson aesthetics, which is now known over the world, is developed through commercial films. That was in his commercial works. He started to work with this kind of tableau and absurd comical acting or lack of acting, actually, which is very little acting in his film.
روی اندرسون جی همجا کسی بکن لانه بهتر کمرشیال کار بکرد یه لانه وکی بجین تجاری بو کارد وانا بس شیواز تابلو بو استایل وانا و کمتری نواندن تدا بو یعنی کارد وانا نواندن که پروفیشنال.
We have talked about an era where you had very heavy film equipment. I mean, we are not turning, I mean, in the 80s, 90s, turning to a new era where even you have a light 16mm equipment, or you're turning into digital. And we get a new generation that is not coming from film school or working the way up in the studios. They are coming from other environment, and we have the big example is the first example is Lucas Moodysson.
Yeah, so Lucas Moodysson was a poet, a writer, who started to make small experiments with film, and then he was able to do his first feature film, and he presented a very different attitude than what you mentioned, people that are trained in the film school. So he was much more the writer making film, and that was the starting point maybe for a new sort of director, as you mentioned.
دما بحث بريد كين أو في بيرامدو بكوكارستين فيلمي أو عامر أو جلد جرام وكارتيجرن أو سر فيلم سازية. حتی کو برابر کن که کو بهتر پیش کامل پیشکتیه نه وینا دیجیتال. البته نوعی که نیل سر داره کو دیر بون ج اکادمیا. البته خولیای حزه وارد نامکاری دا. بولمونه لوکا موریسون یک شویه کو دست که وکی نویسر بو وکی روزانوان بو شعر نویسان. بله هدی کات نامکاری دا و جوری که دیه فیلم برنامه‌تینا کو دیر بوش وان جوری دیه کسی خارج در کارتیت اکادمیا.
His breakthrough film was Fucking Åmål, or sometimes it's called Show Me Love.
Fucking
Åmål.
فيلم كي قالك جريه نوع Fucking Åmål.
And if Lucas Moodysson was the first in this wave, I mean, I blame Magnus for being the mentor for one of the most fantastic films we have seen, I mean, the last 20 years. Anna Odell, Återträffen, what's it called? School Reunion.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, one example of that. Many of the directors today are not coming from film school. They are coming from other art schools.
Yeah. So this director, she was a student at my school, and her exam work is one of the most debated works in the whole history of culture in Sweden, actually. She had a history of mental illness as a young, and she was critical to the way patients were treated at the mental hospitals. So she wanted to investigate the situation and acted as if she was in psychosis. You can translate, I will continue.
Abel Manulas is the name of the actors?
Anna Odell. She is a director and an actor.
Okay. Anna Odell جنكا دارينرو و أكتر ريجي إن كارت كلك یا گریم چیکر کو وکی شوکک چیکر نو کمال گهیدا تایباتی یعنی ولی هات کو گنگ شکودلک لهات کردن حتی نکات چی میجوا فیلماتا وکی و گنگشه و راوستیان سوی فیلم تو کارت وی نهات کردن بود تایباتی فیلم چیکر کو لسر اویدی بید ایشن درونی و او کارتن تندرستی تایبات چهارسری درونی و ویبخو اکتری کرد که چو ویری هرچه که اوه نسخه که درونی همی و جا شوتینگ فیلمی کرد و دیار کردن که چه و معاملات گلبانات تکردن و کسی جی وکی اوی گوتی مگنوسی گوتی گوتی کتابخانه یا خواندی.
So she basically wanted to investigate what is happening to a person who is brought to a mental asylum. So the best way to investigate it was to be there herself. So she played as if she was psychotic, and she was brought to the mental asylum, and she was put in restraint belt and injected.
But you mean like the staff, they know that she's an actor?
No, they didn't know she was acting. They thought she was psychotic in the real sense.
Yeah, but like hidden camera or something. ولی دست پی که تلویزیون نگرد یا بردست بو خلقی همیه نبو بس صالت هفته یادا کاریگری گره بو ویگا به همی خلقی سرشاشین تلویزیون ایجی کارت وانا دیتن و همجا کارمند دیجی هادن ناف بواره دا کپیتر کار بکند بواره سینمای.
But what also happened, I mean, in the world was we saw the new French wave beginning of the 60s. We saw, I mean, a new wave in Britain. And it also influenced, of course, the Swedish film landscape. And we saw a new wave of Swedish directors in the beginning of the 60s. And if Hasse Ekman and Ingmar Bergman was portraying the upper class, the bourgeois society, or going inwards more?
سالش استا شاپولکینی یه درهنر و کار سینمایی لفرانسا و بریتانیا دست بکر البته کار تکرن هم مساند کلسوی دیجی لاندسکیپ فیلمات نچکرن دو جورن درهنر رو چه بو درهنر اشتر کو آماجه بکری بو کلاس آنچین کمالایتی برجوا یت بلند میشه طبقات بلند کار میکردن.
We saw, and these young new directors, they wanted to portray the contemporary society and the class struggle, and names here are, the most important name is Bo Widerberg, but we also have other names like Jan Troell, who was a teacher before, and all of a sudden he was making films, wonderful films, and we saw Vilgot Sjöman, the most successful Swedish director in the States, because he made a film called I'm Curious Yellow and one called I'm Curious Blue. That was it was more sold like porn in the States.
Yeah, those. I mean, you have in this festival you show works by Bo Widerberg.
Yeah.
So that is one example. And Bo Widerberg, he had a very light hand with a medium and was very playful. But maybe mention something more about Ingmar Bergman's, because since there are films by Bergman here in the festival, you show, for instance, Persona, which is a very important work, I think, in the Swedish film history. And there you see how Bergman also incorporates very experimental film. And this is the first time you see maybe a major or major director, also bringing in works. For instance, the beginning of Persona, the editing, is very inspired by Swedish filmmaker Gunvor Nelson, who was living in the States and was totally experimental filmmaker.
چینه دیه در هنری اوید کو سهل داین وانا بتر بو يعني اف جروبت هاي بو چینه دیت کومالگه کار کردن سر مجارين وي دمي كنت دربورين طيبتي لو بدابيري بون 12 طيبتي بون 12 ما مستوى تسبيتي بس باش نجيبو داهنا ولقيت فيلم اجي كاسيتي ديا كو فيلم تشيكر بو انكيروس بلو ان يالو داس رانكي بو طول كاراداك وقارت بوتكري و عندها فيلم بي نتوين يقولوا في أمريكا قرر دن بدان يعني دن بدان هبون وبوفيد بارجي هم جار كسي كديبو هكذا بينا بسر بولماني أو بولمان عم بيشكل بحث كين شوكو الفيلم فيستيفال بيجي كاريوي هيا فيلم بي بيتر وكي أزمونة بوكو دي أزمونة كتكلموا فيلم دارتينا وكم فيلم نيلسون جي لهمجرة راي بدان هون سر سينماي نتويني قلتو أصدقائي المنات كان نوبت وقال لي ضايعون ومن بيزا مقبول المنات أول واجي قطع كم قوة نوبة بيجنا بس هكذا كذا كي كرينجا كنا نوبت وانا زي بيجنا باشيدون بيسن عندنا نصام تمام بقول
Yes. But I mean, with these two persons on Widerberg and Bergman, there was also a shift. I mean, Bergman was always working in the studio. Widerberg took to the roads.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and used the society that was there. I mean, and portrayed not just the thinking, but also the physical environment that was there.
Yeah, Bergman was always very close to theater in a sense, because he was also theater director, and so that was very natural for him to think between theater and film as a very with a close proximity in a way. As you said, Widerberg was more the new wave, French new wave. You went out with the camera in the street.
And I mean, I love the film that's screened here, The Raven's End. I mean, it's and you see some of the best Swedish actors in the coming there. So please try to watch it here. But we talked about. Sorry.
نوبتی دیجی بود و ویدابرگ و کو آوجی کارن باش کردن ولی برگمن تایبت مندیه که بکو ناف استودیو داشتی کاری خوب انجام داد و همچنان جی چون ناف جواکی داد یعنی در استودیو جی کار میکرد او در هنر شانویجی بود بجا تکلی کشیه یا جوان چکر بود ناف برا سینما و شانو داد و کاری ویجی که ویدی دیتا نمایش کردن ریبینز انده اما راستی از حس دکم که همی تماشاوی فیلم بکن چون که گلک اکتر باشی تدا اینو کاری که جوانه
Here in the beginning of the 60s, we also had a very important debate in Sweden about censorship. There was a film called 491. There was sex scenes that were censored, but this censorship was overruled, and after that, I mean, there was less and less censorship in Sweden after this. But there was this huge debate.
Yeah, I think that, but for a very long time, even until, I guess, 90s, all films for the cinema were censored to a certain degree. There was a censorship procedure in the Swedish film. So there would be cut out from sensible parts, violence and sex, and so there was a long history, as in many countries.
But
maybe he would.
الصالح شستي دستبيكين صالح شستي مجاركي جرين هبوكو جنجشة جلسة سانسور كلنا عند كارو بتاعنا أف مجاري هجلة يا يعني برفله هو جنجشة سرعة كنا لو بتاعي تيجيكو فيلم كوكو نوي 911 نهيك بريو دستبيكي سانسور كلنا بشكل معظم بوبالي هدي كيم بوبا أو سانسور كلنا وان جورين فيلم حتى صارت موطي بشكل كيم تلعب.
But in the beginning of the 60s, there was also another thing with the financial system for films. We had an immigrant from Austria in Sweden, Harry Schein. He was a water engineer, but he was also a cinephile and a film critic. And he had very, very good relations to the Social Democratic government. So he made them. They started a film reform that to finance a new Swedish film that said 10% of the film ticket sale should go to producing new Swedish films. And that was the creation of the Swedish Film Institute.
Yeah, and that is the same time when the very building was built in Stockholm, a huge brutalist architecture building, which was the monument of the new era in a way. And this period of time is often, for good or bad reasons, we have a lot of romantic feeling about this as contemporary filmmakers, that this was the heydays of the Swedish film, and this is where you really could finance anything with a strong support also from the power in a way.
برای اگر ویدیو را بیشتر کوکیش چین بیت یا سوریانی اوکراینی سوئیل لوکا بنابراین سوری گرک بترن جریت اوکراینی و هر کارچن برای جغرافیا اوکراینی نزدیک از سوئیل بس بنابراین که کمتر دهیم برای سوری.
No, but it is. I mean, also, how do you translate the question?
You give me the answer.
Oh, okay. No, I mean, we had 3 years of more or less lockdown, where also cinemas were closed. So I mean, that's a whole. A small part of a generation that didn't went to the cinema for 3 years. And they stayed home and took Netflix subscriptions or played video games, computer games. No, it's the cinema today is not the natural meeting place like it was. I mean, in my youth and your youth. I mean, it's there's so much competing, and I'm as a festival programmer. Festivals will live on. I mean, the event. I mean, but the normal cinema, daily cinema. I mean. We know here, there's no tradition here. Will it ever be a tradition? Or can we make it a tradition here in Kurdistan to go to the cinema? I mean, it's... but it's also in Europe, I mean, people are not coming back to cinema fast enough now. I mean, it's very slow.
گنج بترین نو سینما ایدا بسیار شبیه او کو البته او ترجمه میکری گرد نت وبجاردة أبو درستي كوكاين من الفكرة لما سباسي بقى سيار ذكرى بقى كو بترشح لبدأ باباتي كو لما نبي مناقشة كي كو جانش بسينا نافل مدرانجي يت تمام بشي بشي كو أب وجوهنا كاري بسردني دو تشدن هذا كان صالة جانش السينما يدير بويا كيف كتير أشبه أف لعبة تكنولوجية ياري موبايل عن نتفليكس عن قرينا وان آميرا ولكن يكو وكي بله أف كالتوري شونا فيلمي كخاك الوجود ببينن بشيوازة كديا ماما ذكرنا ديا سينما يا كاربو هكذا كين كالتوري شونا سينما ببينا فيلما لما هكا سوالات ويلي ولاتت وانا البته ويلي فيلم استيبال هنا بس وكي بين وكي حسب كي كل بيري اشتاق كالتور درستي چنوي كو شوازة بردوام و خلق بچن گرد بچن چنا سینمای سردان کرد دینا فیلم استیبال بس بشنیم گنه بردوامی کار دائما کو مطابقه که فیلمی بنان تماشاوان سینمای لما بهتر بيجيك يا جرينجر كو جخ سالوه تكلم بس باهات باهات كي جديدة يعني جرى تقريبا أكاديمية كارد.
No, cinema once was for everyone. I mean, I'm afraid it will can go to be an elitist thing. I mean, for we in the cultural sphere. I mean, it's. I have my concerns. No, I said cinema was the most popular art. I mean, everyone went to the cinema, old and young. But I mean, I'm afraid it can be a more elitist thing. I mean.
هبر داوی بو او فکراوی بو که اسرائیل دیکو دست که سینما بو همین مازن چینه جدای کمالاتی تمام جدا داشتن سینمایه برای نکن هدی یا تایبات بیت چینه که خلکی ولی کو پیوندیه کو هی سینمایه اون بهتر چنین سینمایه.
Yeah, but could I just add one thing about this? I think, I believe you're right, Freddy, but on the other hand, I grew up on the countryside and there were no cinema. And my grandmother went to cinema once in her life. She saw Ingmar Bergman's Seventh Seal and she said, I will never go back to cinema again.
الوجد از شكل هبدج الجرايات والمنا أو ماغنوس الدوري باجرا برودوية جندوية وجد ديكوي جارب شوية سينما بيش فيلمكي تمانية خدا ودمازوب ريا بجي قلت يا سيدي ماش ما بيش فيلم برجع كل ناسيت.
My question is a bit close to Zahel's question, but regarding this of the advent of immigrants waves to your country. My question is, so throughout the presentation we learned that there have been changes in the history of this Swedish cinema in parallel with the unfolding events. For example, we talked about the war in Vietnam. And migrants, you talked about the second generation migrants and their influence on the Swedish cinema. So the new, is there a new era starting with the advent of the newly started Russian, not NATO rivalries on the northern and eastern states of Europe? So the question is, with these changes, is a new era starting, or should we say, are you already feeling the change in the Swedish cinema?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's strange for us in Sweden to realize that the Russian aggression came as a surprise in a way. in the whole culture field, there has been no debate about, let's say, Russian imperialism or Russian colonialism. Those terms haven't even existed in our debate. So the whole discussion has been around the post-colonial narratives, North and South, and very much inspired or influenced by the American discussion. So we haven't seen, I think, now everyone is so surprised, although there has historically been a long history of like fear for the Russians in the military sense, but no one was really aware of what's happening, and I think still there is no in the cultural life reaction to this. Really, it's still as if we just woke up to a new world in a way. Suddenly there's a war very close, and it is as if it hasn't fully realized yet.
بسیار ابو وقتی واداخل کردن که سینما سویده به قناع وجود داوری و البته او بنابر او کسی کچوی نمیده او برون کاری جیان را چه بو او وقتی ملانی جنگ ویتنام آیا بسیار آیا اف کاری کچه بنا جنگ نوبل اوکراین و روسیا و من ملانی ها دل کارگری کردید وقتی بله برسیده بجید که حتی بله اف ایونت چه بیرون اف ملانی هم کاری گرنا یعنی برسه که سانا بکنن آنجی خلق سر بابا روسیا و آنجی اف برفرقینا لاین سربازی وانا و کوار گرمه توی آنجی گرم امریکا وانا خلق تقریبا به آره آنجی لجانتا من دوشیه که آمازن چه بود تا سجی لانی کمالاتی دا چه بود که برفرق ناوی جنگی روسیا و اوکراین و پیتر ناوچه دا براب بیتو اکی شوکا بویا کوش خوابونه که یجی بو خلقی و کسی بروازی.
I think that the Russian war and reaction we don't know, but I'm sure that another factor now, the Western Hemisphere is turning to the right, to nationalism. Even in Sweden, you know, we got a right-wing government supported by ultra-nationalist party. I think, I mean, art per definition is against the power, and I maybe we can get a reaction from the filmmakers against this right-wing turn. So we will see more films, that touch this subject.
I don't agree there, with the artist per definition on the side of against the power. I can assure you that there will be poets in Russia writing war poems, celebrating the war right now.
But for me,
وقتی که دیجیه که رنگبدانی کرد جبری که جنگ بیناچه چه روی آجی که خودبونا و بلبونا پارتیا راسته بنابراین چپه که بتنو که اروپا سرده حزب راست یعنی بهتر کل ایدئولوژی که گشگی داره یا نوع کتبات که نگر کازادی رومانا اما البته باور داره که کومکا کارین هنری آنجی سینمایی بینه برسر درباره بلندونا به حزبی اویشی بودی از پیشه که یعنی هر دجا یعنی عکسی پیشوانه از روی که بلکی روسیا ممکنه کار بده کرن و دستخوشی جنگی بکنن که تأثیر کاری نریم همین اونی برای یه میج داره.
Ruben İngilizce moderne kavgasını ne? İngilizce ama da biraz farklı bir şey olacak.
Saçma.
Spor bu analistler spor bu cevabı da bir yere gelmedi be. بسيارة هاي أنا وأبو رجعوا جام لمفاجأة جديد بحسن الرجوع سينما سويدي من بسيارة من أبو علي هول بالي تشكرنا في المغربنا درس كرنا السويدي يعني فيلم غادنا درس كرنا فاشي إزت خلاص هذا كذا أبو بسيارة هيك يعني
إيه كيف جبنا وانا
كيف تعرف
هر سيارة
بالعادة سيدابيجن تسبيكا
هول بالي
فيلم يعني بالي درس كرنا فيلم هول هادنا تشكرنا فيلم تخلكيت إنا بيشكيش كرنا شنيكا بو عاجب وفيلم هابن يعني شي سينما درست كيلو شنيكا هذا تندي هذا كيرنكو هول بنا تشكرنا طبعا فيلم على عرض بكام تسبيكا سينما سويدي وكوان سينما دي جهاني دست مشارة نافارولكي يا ميجوي بويا أنجلو رنگ ودان واقعيوان بويا هر دست بگين أبا بسيارة دوي بسیار سه آیا پیدا بونا جهانگیری و پیشکشنا تکنولوژی کارتگرن سینمای دیگر سویده یا سینما هر وکی خومای رو پیشکشید بسپاس
So he has three questions. The first one is regarding the history of cinema in Swedish. So how it began? The whole before the film, so there were places to show the films, or the film started as a cinema and then it needed a place to show it to people. So what started before the other? At the beginning when you mentioned the beginning of the cinema in Sweden? Did you get that?
Maybe you can answer.
So the location or the production? So the production before the location or?
No, but I mean, sorry?
Yeah, theater, like a place that people go to see, so the location to show it.
Yeah, but first, I mean, this was this traveling. I mean, some manager had a couple of films that were first very, very, very short, and they had a program, and they rented a locality. I mean, and screened these films. So I mean, the film came before the cinema.
بس ده بيجي فيلم بالي كو جهتشي بمنو سينما وجه شانويه هذا چونكو أولا وقت برهم تينات داشن الجها عرض كان بيجا أو فيلم بو بالي به. The second one is that at the beginning when in Sweden the cinema started, what was the topic of these movies? Like they were all about history or something like the heritage, or it was things that problems of the community, society at that time. So what was the focus of what would be the scenario and idea of it, or the story of it?
But I mean, at first, I mean, this short film, was it just a funny story or a tragic story, a small story? I mean, this film, I said the first film that was shot, it was a Danish film. It was they took a bear to an island and they hunted the bear. I mean, that was the simple story, and it was small, very simple story. And then when they started to do the silent movies, I mean, it was when they used the cultural heritage,
Yeah.
some
Adoption of novels from Swedish authors. Selma Lagerlöf, the Nobel Prize winning author, for instance, there were adoption of her stories to film. That was one of the early examples of film.
دست بيكي دواكي وقتي قالك بشيوازة السوداء برهمينا فيلم تافكرن البته چیرو که قالك وليت دانا بني بيجي كو كيلات يكا يجوي وانا بي باشي ناتيتت ناف فيلم وادا چونكو دست بيكي قالك يا ساده بو لما بيتر رندشت تراجي بون تراجي ديابون آنجا كوميديا بو چونكو بچيك يعني كرد بو عبيدي بو وكاري قالك اكساد عبيد بساده ايبا بون يعني بيلاويدا يكو يكشون في المعرض وهرچا كبيرنا الجزيرة كبيرتا نيجي كنا نانشت توصل بيتا تاتا ماشكن بس باشي ناخد بيتا بيدن سينما بيدن تويري دا هندك كاري دي داكا كو جدا بيتو بشتي دي وقت بيش خستن نشتا كو دانك تهاتا تدا ويكا بدا عندك روماني يدي جالجرينجيت كاساكي برنيوس السويدي شو سرمان رومانا هاتا كنا كو كيلاتي بدي دالو. So
it's just like today. I mean, you take a book that is a bestseller and you early to hear a little conversation about Swedish cinema. And it's not a conversation between us, it's a conversation among us all. I mean, we know everything already, you don't know, so you are the one to put the questions.
هردو أو همين مجرد زمان لو ما كان يشان نوبرا ودايا نوبرا ونو هوا دايا كوكي بيرو عمادون بجرما أن دبسيارتو هرجلينو ديجان يشسركي.
And I'm Freddy Olsson. I'm working as a programmer for the festival in Gothenburg, but I have also been a producer in Sweden of films.
نوبي فريدي أولسون أو برنامج لغوتنبرغ برای فستیوال سویدیشی کارتکه.
And a regular here in Duhok.
و برادری بدام می‌بریم در دوهوکی و هجی گفتنی هجی کو برادری که کودش می‌جدا ویل سردانا ویلید کرد.
But I bring a friend here that was long before me. He was in Kurdistan. This is Magnus, a professor at the University of Arts and Crafts in Stockholm, but also a writer. And in 2002 you were already here in Duhok.
Yeah, I was here.
Please tell me a little bit about your Kurdish experience.
برادری پروفسور ماگنوس بارتلس کو پروفسور لزانکو هنر و کارندستی لستوکهولم نویسر جی و سال 2002 جی کردستان سردان کردستان کلیه.
Yeah, the reason I was here 20 years ago is that me and my colleague, we were working on a book about Yazidis. At the time, we heard about Yazidis in Sweden for the first time, I believe, in the beginning of 2000, and we were really amazed by this small minority here in Kurdistan.
جرا اولی وقتی سردان برگرین بی سال بری نکبون اوجی بو مرما چکلات پرتوکل بود درباره ازدیا چون کل سویدی اف مجاره بود بود سال 2000 وانا بدوی بوکر.
And it took another 20 years, and now it is also published actually in Kurmanji language by Avesta Publishing in Istanbul. So there is a copy here if you want to see it later on.
شتی 20 سالان یهاتیا چاپ کردن در استانبول زمان جدا دا کرمانجی یهاتیا چاپ کردن.
That was our history, but now it's the Swedish film history. And the Swedish film history, we will start with a more chronological expose over the history of Swedish film. But it started already back in 1890s. When the first film was made in Sweden. But Sweden had a high time of films in the silent movie area with persons like Victor Sjöström and Maurice Stiller, then later on was exported to the US.
Yeah, I think that period is maybe even still today is a few of our contemporary directors in film, they would claim that those early works from the silent film era is perhaps one of the best works in the film history.
او وانا كورتيك درباره خود اماجه بكر وكيجي درباره فيلم تشيلكو فيلم السويدي هالبتا صارن يعني 200 صار بري منها الدست بيكي جين 1900 و 1900 الدست بيكي جي سويد فيلم بدنك دست بيكر و کسین بر نیاز بکتوبو سیدلر بو که اوید هجی باشینا چونه امریکا و گلک یا بر نیاز که وفتوی راستری باشترین جورن فیلمی وانا برهمتینا.
And it was not only directors, but for example, Moritz Stiller, he brought a young talent from Sweden, an actress, Greta Garbo, to the States.
تاني در هنا نبون هالبتا كاسين بدون بيروكابون وهنجربون منا موريستيلر أوي أكترجي ليزيك بانجي تقال خبرن جسويدي بو أمريكا.
And then it came to the, I mean, with a change from silent to films with sound. In the 30s in Sweden, it was a more popular films that were, I mean, the films were now reaching out to the more normal people. So it was more comedies and music films.
I guess that period of time is it's a similar situation in most European countries and maybe all over the world, that there was a shift from an experiment with a new art form to the establishment of the entertainment industry in a way. And of course the same thing happened in Sweden. But Sweden was very known mostly through the actress or the actors. And I mean, it's worth mentioning that Greta Garbo, she is so iconic as an actress. You could find her name on restaurants still in Stockholm and on images, and she is forever engraved in the Swedish history, not only film history but the Swedish history. Greta Garbo.
Greta
Garbo.
صابت سيهادا گوران کاریت چه بود بر همینان فیلم دا بدنگی بود دنگ چون مجارد جدا دا وکی کومیدی و فیلم میوزیک و اف گورینا کارتکرن هبور بسر دولت دیت اوروپایی و گلک لزیبانو اکتر ویگاوه درکتن و شواجی او گریتا او اکتر کسرکی بو راسي برنيوس بو و تنانات يعني الجهين قشتيجي وكي خارنده كافيه وبيت هايجي قالت بينما وديت وانا يعني برنيوس بو اكترتها وابجولت فيلمي.
Maybe we should mention a few films so people would know Greta Garbo, with Humphrey Bogart, for instance.
That was Ingrid Bergman.
Sorry, Ingrid Bergman.
Yeah.
There are two major stars, and you talk about Ingrid Bergman. That is the second iconic face of the Swedish cinema. Ingrid Bergman and Greta Garbo. But Ingrid is a good continuation of the story, maybe, because that's the next phase.
Because she was first, I mean, in the States, but she also worked a lot with Italian. And she also married the well-known, I mean, the Italian director Rossellini.
Yeah.
But if we continue with the Swedish, I mean, when it comes to the war, I mean, and the very established Swedish companies, Svensk Filmindustri, they had the big studio, and they employed a young man, Ingmar Bergman. At that time, I mean, the studios in the States and also in Sweden, they had their staff. They were employed full time, and so they made a lot of films. Some shit, some good. But one of these people that was employed in the middle of the 40s was the young Ingmar Bergman, and already in '44 he wrote a script for a film that was a huge success. Hets.
Yeah, so that was a film about the pressure for students at school. I don't know the English title. It's probably Stress or
Caligula.
Caligula is the English title.
I think.
And that was a very radical film for the time, where you also show the power structure in the society, where the teacher is a very cruel character, and actually driving the protagonist to death, more or less.
But he didn't direct it. He was the scriptwriter of that film. But
maybe we should translate.
البته کسی برنیاز ولمن گریتا گاربرت و گلن به ایرنا اوانا گل کار کردن دمکی دا تایوتی ایرنا گل ایتالیا کار کرد و پشتیگی شیب روسلینی کرد ایتالیا ولیشی کار کردن البته تمام دبدا السویدی هنده کمپانیا و استودیو آوا بون دویگا بدا انرژی کسر بوکو زالما که گنج بوکو حتی ناف بواره سینمایی دا نتمینی برتو امریکا جی کار کنو سویده جی هایده دویگا به ورچرخانک بوش برکو گل کارمند هات ندام از راندن او کار جی گل کار نکرد ولی هنده کار باشمان هنده کار جی ند باشمان سال 1945 فیلمک وانا برهم اینا درباره او ضغوطات رانجي او زحمتيا سر خطابيان دهيد و طيبتي سر خطاب خانه بو وكي قلت انه بيبي غريب لابو و بيتر اوانا دا خويا كرن كو ما مستعين خرابان كارتي كرنا كارتي پرورده و چوا هنده جارا او فشار زیده یا سر خطابخانه هایی به کارگری سبتابی و کتابون در کیسه و برای حالت دجوار بچند ناف مطابقه.
But in the 40s, in the end of the 40s, Bergman started to direct and be a director. But he was not the only one. We have a very well-known artist family in Sweden, the Ekmans, and he had Ekman and Bergman. They were fighting in the beginning, end of the 40s and beginning of the 50s. But Ekman gave up and he went in exile at Mallorca, but Bergman continued and made a huge success. Also abroad, because he was. It was sexually. It was. I mean, Sweden was a country that showed frontal nudity first, so it was a huge success. But it was not Bergman who started, it was another film, Sommaren med Monica, The Summer with Monica, that showed a tit for the first time. And of course it was a huge success out in the world. But when, about Bergman in the 50s.
Yeah, we can translate it.
دمانية صار الشليدة هندا كسي ديجي هاد نضاف سينما دا وكي خانة ودا إيغمان أولا قال تبتي إيغمان مفلانيك بنابرا وي و إيغمان جيدا چهو أو كسي بني ويدا كو بوري فيلم سازي دابو بله أو بردام نبود چو جه کدی مالی برا چو بو جه کدی بس ایمان بردام بود و سرکرتن دست کوبینا حتی کو سال دیمای سال پنجیه ندک فیلم ورا برهمینا جهان دا یکمی بود کو وینن بیجل کن اکترا درکبن سرشاشه سینمایی دا بولمونه فیلم سانتا مونیکا کو یکم جار بو کو سینگ آف جنه سینما دار در کمی به جلب و گل سرکت نجی تصفورانی.
Yeah, I mean, if we look back to Bergman's heritage but also think about Bergman's position at the time, it's hard to imagine something similar today. When one director really had so much resources and so much influence in the
At the same time, he was not only film director, he was also working as a boss of two municipal theaters.
Yes.
At the same time, I mean.
Not only that, he was able to stop the traffic on the major roads in Sweden for 2 days because he didn't want the sound to leak into his shooting. He could get any location he wanted to film and more or less any resources he wanted.
اگر ام سحقینا دیروکا بیرمانی کارت بی گلک زحمتی بودیتن و هر بد یا بتاو یا گلک یا سنجرا کشه اگر فرارت کین وان روزا جبرکو آبتنینا بر درهنر بو ریبری دو شانوین باجرداری آجیبو اوی گلک سرچاب کارتینان بو کاری خوب و هر بد ایجی دستالوزی که بو گلک جارا بودنا دا ترافیک راستینید کل ناوچه که حتی دا کار خوی فیلمسازی انجام داد دا کودنگ نهینا ناخوی فیلمی دا بودنا الجهه که دو روش نهیلا سیارت و منطقه دا باید وچید.
Also, I think it's important to say that even when we look at Bergman today, we think his films are very experimental and avant-garde films, many of them. But all of them were shown at the major cinemas in the countryside in Sweden. So even people who rarely saw film, they would know about Bergman. They would have seen his works and films. And later on, we're going to talk about that a little later, when TV in the 70s, Bergman was in every people's home. One of the most present culture intellectuals you can think of in that sense.
But talking about TV, I mean, TV was introduced in Sweden in '56.
Yeah.
But I mean, didn't have that impact then. The big impact came in the beginning of the '60s, when many of they also employed a lot of people that get the means to do some more experimental things. But
اگر پرول کن ویسرگانی کارن بیرمان السينما جدا الولايات السويد تقريبا همي سينماات الله كنا وقال برنياز بو خلكي خرينياسي وطيبتي صال 56 لما تلفزيون هاتيا ناف سويد دا كانت اون تلفزيون يجي.
Yeah, and then there was the hidden camera and there was the sound.
كاربي او شويري وصاو او تيجا هندن كويا نساخة درونية وأبي تسجيل صوتي كير وبشيوازة كي بشرتي أفل يعني أفل ما دوكيمنت كيرو وأستوفي بيري نظامي كوا شيء تحقيقه كبيرة كي بقولينا كده بقولنا تلقيت بيري معاملات شوية قال وحتى لقيت هندي كوشين قالت يعني
So yes, so I mean there was a huge debate in Sweden about is this what you do in art schools? You know, is this our tax money is paying this kind of behavior? But I think the whole debate changed when they understood the seriousness of her work, but also finally they understood that this is a method by an artist to involve herself and her own experience and her own body in the work. And this was the way she continued to work also, to merge life and filmmaking in this sense.
قالك مناقشات نكلن سر كارت ويب طيبة تيجي والمنا چینا کبود گوتن هنوسا وارسا کن و وسا اکادمیا و برهبت کرد بو کاری که هنری چونکو بینی نهنده که ترمانی نهنده که کو هنر بشه واسه کی دیگه نفشه واسه کو کچکری و هر باتجی دقیقش دیجیتال نکردن سر کچوا اکتر آن در هنر جسته خوب کار بینید و کی آمرازه کو همجارا تجربه که چکت و همجارا خوشی ببیت او کرسته تجربه و بچتت بار هنر سینما دا.
I think that her film Reunion is also she says it's payback time for my student friends. So she called for a reunion, but she's staging a reunion with actors and how she think that they would behave. I mean,
yeah, and she uses the same idea that she was bullied as a child, and now she's going to try the situation in real life, so to speak, and see what happens when you confront the bullies.
کاری که دیگه هم به reunion کو افجی همجرا همان استایل کو وکی تجربه که آنجی راهن بیشتر درسته که کو هف فیلم بولینگ یعنی تنمر نظام کردی بگویند دما کسی که لازم بیتان رنگی که تایبت بید وقتی بیدی بچی تراما بید کن آن وقتی کالت از شکال اسپاسانسنا افکار چونکو ابخو افاکترم بچیکی دا توش اشکستنی بود و کود بهتش کندن یعنی لنبانی که درونی سخته که ناف جواکی که دا ناف خلکی دا افکار برام بیده کردن جالو ما افکار کرد و هم جاروشی بشه واضح بود و اوید اکتر و اوید نواندن کری توش بان بابتا بون آنجی کاری ایمان اف مصطلحت ها و بشه واضح معاملت کرده.
No, and I mean it's a hard film in a way, and a very artistic special. But it was a box office hit, very special. But I mean we can go on for long, but we let's go now to what happened this May. Sweden had 3 films in the Cannes competition. Never heard of before. And 2 of these films were made of second generation immigrants in Sweden. And this is not the first time it happens that a second generation goes up to be directors, but it's been the last 10-15 years we've seen that Swedish film has got new perspectives with directors coming from other cultures. So I mean, you are screening here Boy from Heaven here by a director whose father was from Egypt. He was an animator.
Tarek Saleh.
Yeah, his father was an animator who I think he gets support for 20 years in Sweden for making an animation film, but it never happened.
Not really.
And we have another Iranian family-raised director that was in Cannes. And before that we have had, for example, the Joseph Fares from Lebanon, and we have Özür from the region here. So there's a brand new generation, and there are so many young female directors we haven't mentioned also. So I mean, the diversity, if we saw up till of course we have Maj Zetterling and Susanne Osten and a few female directors, but most of the directors were men. But now it's much more diversity, and and also this that we have talked about before, that I can take it first.
عندك فيلم كل فيستيفال كان بجدار إنه خلاصي بس وبينه نقول من السيش وانا سيش سويدي دوش وانا جلاي بنابرا ريكو جغير جهنا شاولات يجوينا سويدي هاد من برامينا أف شابون بنابريا كسي دي غير نتوى جدا كوتشينا سويدي كارتكلنا كارينيها بو گوران کاریات نو روی سینمایی و کار سینمایی برمونه کسی که دیگه بو کوش مصری تاتی خزانه وانا با بیبی بار انیمیشنی کار کرد کاردوگی کارتونی فیلم کو کار تکرن هم کو سویدی جیه کرده برف پیش دارچی همجارا کسی که دیگه کو ایران هات با خزانه وانا اوجی بجدار کام بو وانا جوزیف اگه جنان هاتی بشد کسی نه کارتی کرن هم با کشولات اندیت هاتی نسویدی و همجا راجی بجداری ها جنه وقتی در هنر و کارین سینما سازی زیده تر لباتن دست به که پتر زمان بون بس دوما سینما سویدی نکه رنگ و رنگ یعنی بکار لاتن باگراند جداش همجاراش رگزن جنومه رو دیتی کن.
So I mean there is no lack of creativity and ideas and stories to tell. I mean my concern is more to get the young generation to go and watch cinema. I mean we will have a lot of films, but will anyone go to see them? Will there be any cinemas to screen them? That's my more concern.
Yes, and maybe we should mention a few words about the winner in Cannes as well, Ruben Ostlund.
Okay.
Because you have, I believe, 2 or 3 films. You have Play and you have Square.
Yeah.
2 films here. And he is perhaps the most successful Swedish filmmaker at the time. It's interesting to see maybe these 2 films together. Plays is done in a quite different mood. You have a very fixed camera. And at that time he was working with an artist, filmmaker, Marius Brandrud. Now he has a large international production, of course. But I think maybe you want to translate a little bit before I characterize it.
بحثی خلاصه کلیت که کل کانیات یا باگرتنش رای ریبا اشکن کو سفر برای میانه دو فیلم شوان الوی دیتا نمایش کردن کاری با وصف کو کامیرین جلگی بید کو نیتا باکرن و کارگر بوریس براندنز کرد کو اوجی کسی که کارین بی برنیاسن جیهانی دم.
I think maybe seen from outside, he has a good sense for social psychology in a way that he can create scenes when the protagonists are facing moral dilemmas that they can't handle, and then they get very undecisive and they don't know how to act. So there is something of a fear of conflict in his work, which is something very Swedish, we say, because Sweden have been out of war for 200 years, and it says that we don't know how to handle any conflicts anymore, and we get afraid of very little. There has to be, very small conflict will be very large for a Swedish person. This is maybe what is the kern of Ruben's work in a way.
موریس یه زیره بود باره درونی کمالایتی دا که کارسر لمجار کد که گریب و کسایتی خطین سویده تایبتی سوید که بهتر 2 سالا چه جنگاده نبود و بجا لو مشارك هذا تستفيد من سركو آية كلمة ملونية عن هذا الشيء كل تيجي أو بداية ترى يشوى من بدون كسركو ما برسولي لو ما بطل بدنا كاري بيبوكو أنا داري كما رأيتي مشارك كما رأيتي داري باتشر تكس.
No, I think it's your turn.
You pick anyone and
Whatever. Yeah. Yes.
My question.
We have singers, musicians that is very well known in the broad audience in Sweden.
هنجرا musician وسترامبيجي كان كردن في السويد برني وصل.
بس بديك خارجي موضوعي ماغنوس يجي أول ما نتفشل كي بيسار دعوة فراد جوهري بيسار رومان لبيس توصيوية كي أموان داخوس كي كذا كي بيسار مهمان كي كذا بيسار.
He's the director of the writer unions in Duhok, and so he invites you one evening to be present at their union because their friends also.
Tell me to
invite you.
Ah, right, okay. Yeah, he's here on the back of the.
Yes.
Yeah, so you got me. Yeah, so you are welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
زۆرسپاس دوو پرسیارم هەبوو من پرسیار یەکەمیان پەیوەستە بە بینەر و بابەتی ناوەڕۆکی فیلمە سویدیەکانەوە ئێمە زانین کە هێزی سینەمای ئەمریکی بەتایبەت هۆلیوود کاریگەرێکی زۆر زۆری لەسەر هۆڵەکانی سینەمادانەوە و ڕاکێشانی بینەر بۆ خۆیان ئەمەش کاریگەرێکی گەورەی کردوتە سەر هەموو وڵاتە ئەوروپیەکان بەتایبەت لە سویدیش ئەم حاڵەتە زۆر زۆر لە کاتێکا مەسەن بەشێک لە دەرهێنەرانی سویدیان لەوە کردەوە کە لەناو فیلمەکانیانە هەندێک لە بەهاکانی سوید گەڕانەوە بۆ پیشاندانی خەڵکی گوندەکانی باکوور لە سویدیان بەهۆی کۆمیدیا ئەوە بکەن بینەری سویدی سەیری فیلمی سویدی بکەن لە ئێستایە ئەو مژارانە چین ئەو بابەتانە چین کە سینەمای سویدی ڕکابەری سینەمای ئەمریکی پێکا بۆی بینەری سویدی بۆ خۆی ڕاکێشێ لە ناو خۆی وڵاتەکە ئەم پرسیاری یەکەم بوو
باش هەردوو پرسیار بکەوت
پرسیاری دووهەم
پرسیاری دووهەم
پرسیاری دووهەم وەکو پێشتریش باس کرا لە ئێستایە بەهۆی ئەوەی ڕێژەیەکی زۆری پەنابەری وڵاتان لە سوید هەن و گەنجەکانیشان هاتوونەتە ناو واری کارکردنەوە مەسەڵەن چەند ساڵە پێش ئێستا دەرهێنەرێکی وەکو عەلی عەباسی کە فیلمی لە بۆردەری دروستکردبوو لە کان خەڵاتی وەرگرت ئەمە کابرێکی فارس بوو یعنی مەسەڵەن ئێرانی بوو ڕوئیای تازەن تەسەوراتی تازەن بۆ سینەما و ئێستا ئەتوانین بڵێن سینەمای سویدی بەرەو چ ئاراستەیەک هەبووە کە خەڵکی تر هاتوونەتە ناو وڵاتەکە و قساکەن یعنی بۆ نمونە تەسەوراتی کەسێکی وەکو عەلی عەباسی لەگەڵ بێرگمان یان لەگەڵ رایدرسن یان لەگەڵ تەنانەت ئۆستلند زۆر زۆری جیاوازی هەیە ئێستا بەرەو چی ئەڕوا سینەمای سویدی سپاس.
So he has two questions. One is regarding the Swedish cinema when it was in competition with the Hollywood, and Hollywood get growing faster and getting more audience. So how Swedish cinema is attracting the audience back to see like the Swedish movies? Because in that moment maybe they focus on the villages and the rural area or comedy to bring audience more, to increase their audience. So what is the situation now as we see that the Hollywood is expanding and so if there is a struggle between the Swedish cinema to have more audience, especially the Swedish people to bring back.
Yeah. It could be worth mentioning there that Sweden has, in my eyes, a strange financial politic that I think this is due to this question that a commercial successful Swedish film get more funding. So, I mean, for instance, in the literary world, if you're a bestseller, you will not have an extra grant from the state. But in the case of cinema, there is a relation between the number of audience and the financial means to the film. Correct me if I'm wrong, Freddy. But that has been, I think, politics to fight back to Hollywood, so to say.
Yes, to build up strong Swedish producers against the Hollywood. To have a stable producers cadre in Sweden. No, I just wanted to say that I mean, this system with 10%, it's not now abolished. I mean, no, it's state money again directly. So this is taking away this system. But where you took 10% not only of the Swedish film, but also about Hollywood films, who took 10% to make Swedish films. But anyhow, like in every country, the film industry and especially the cinemas are dependent on the local comedies. I mean, it's everywhere it's like that. I mean, you always have a local comedy that is premiering at Christmas. I mean, and then we had, for many years, we had a Swedish comedian, Lasse Åberg, who did, I think, 6 the charter tour to different regions in the world. But I mean, it could be 2-3 million people going to watch these films, and of course it brought money back to the system. But I think it's like that everywhere, and it will continue. I mean, to compete with the American blockbusters, you need these local comedies.
هذه سبارة بو برسيا البته گریدانی که هی لگل لعنی آبوری و سیاسی شو که چنین او سینما سازانه و نبتوان باوشتی داری زیادت درستوان و بیانن اولو کاتیا به شواز کان بر همه کان دو است داری که زیادت بینه بیه و وكو لساتاش عماجي بيقول كدل صوتي أو باجي كورد جيدا دقراوا أو فيلم سازية بلام أو هل جيدا شو كبال بشتيكي يكسر هلا لين يميلوا دقرا إنجا بو أوي ككوميديا بيا هربابتي كده حضرتك لهمشون كراستا كأجر كوميديا كي لوكالية يعني شتيك الجريد راعي أو خلق بيا أو نام شيء تليك يمكن سنجرات يشربوا خلق بويا لويدا زيادة كلمة كر وبرهنياني كي أو لأن أبو يكبو أو كبرهنياني كي بتوه بك بشوازي كي دائمي يعني عند مؤسسة هذه عند شوين هذا ككاري برهنياني بك وبولمون هذيك لو كوميديانا كسركوتو لا ششوين يجاوز لجهانا بلاو بويوا ودهاتي كباشي هنا يبغوا خلقوا بينالي زورشي بس
Now I think so many people are leaving us. Yeah. So I mean, maybe 1 or 2 last questions.
But there was one more.
There is another one.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry.
The immigrants in Sweden, like Ali Abbas and The Border, his movie that he won the Cannes Festival, and so like this impact and influence. Now, what is the impact of these immigrants in influencing the Swedish cinema, and to what direction is leading, and what is the difference between the immigrants in Sweden and the original Swedish directors or producer. So what is the orientation movement? You want to understand what is the differences?
I mean, but people with another background, of course, it's another come with other questions and other perspectives. I mean, it's wonderful that we get a more diverse. I mean, Bergman was very occupied with his own soul and heart. I mean, when new directors they see the world outside themselves, and so I think it's wonderful that we get new perspectives. As I think it's wonderful that we get more female directors with other questions in the films. So just positive.
والله يبدأ موقع بسيالي دوم دلت هبطة كاريجري هبوا زور أو كان من درس education كان كلو كوجامي بس كده خلكان كتيش شو كوكو براول دي شيء كيف ما نروح وضعي زور زارو يعني أنا أروح يضل يخوي هذا الشيء الدنيا بيني كأخوي يخوي هذا رؤياي برنامج‌تر و أنا برای ام کسانی که تازه نبوده هولی دا عن هولی عندها وكل شوازي بسياري تدرس بكن مجالي تدرس بكن كاري لسر بكري هبطا نكتنها خلقي جواز تنانا بقزي جوازي شكاوي أما جنتي كركجن هاتنا درس كري سينما و سينما سازية هم جالمان كاريجري هو كتوز الجدائي بكرتنا يو رنگا ورنگ مدوابة كان كواكلا مشرمي شوية كاري خلقي جواز تيابي باشتا دري.
Can I just add one small thing there? But I think it's what Freddy says is of course right, that they have other stories, they have other experience and other networks. But I think they also bring in another view on the Swedish. Coming from the outside gives you, a different eye also. So this double experience they have as second generation immigrants, they have a different background, but they also know the Swedish. So they can also speak about Swedish life today in a different way than people with many generations back. I think that perspective also has to be mentioned in a way.
رؤياي كتريش أويك أوخر كان شوي كتير كدين هبطا أزمون وكتوري خوانيش لقلي أنا دي كدين تكلاري كتوري سويدي دبل ناس سويدا كأعواد دبل ليردا أو لعنشي جرينجا كمجالي تيجي الوجدات ولناو كشوري كتير أخو تاني كلتيجيشني بابا كان زيادة طول من بيته.
بسیاری خیرم هبوو سەبارەت بەوەی کە باسی کردە ساڵی شەستەکان ڕقابە لەسەر چەند فیلمێکدان لە سوید ئایا ئێستا بەراوردی ئەو قانون ڕقابەی کە لەسەر فیلمەکان بوو ئەو سەردەما لە ساڵی شەستەکان ئێستاش هەمان ئەو بەندانە ئەو قانونەی بەردەوامە لەسەر فیلمەکانیان مەسەن گۆڕانکاری بەسەر أو داعتي أو برسياري كما برسياري دوهم سبارة بسر أويكا فن ليش أويكا فن دي حكومتي دولتي بيدا بيلبو فيلما سويديا كان بيشتر داها سرمایه گذاری أو فيلمانا لچين لذكرا فيلمي سويدي چه سرمایه گذاری لكن سنبونونا صالي 57 فيلمي Bergman كفيلمي 7 صار لفنزا عبدالي $150,000 في شوك $150,000 زور بو چه سرمایه گذاری و فیلمانه لك بيجي تفاندي دولتو پیدا بي أرو بسیارم
بس ناوی فیلمەکە لەبیرتر؟
فیلمەکە 7 صار يعني
7
خدمي حفتان.
So 2 questions. The censorship in the 60s when it started and putting censors on the films and cinema, is it the same regulations that get to now, or what is the change in the regulation and the censorship from then to now?
but nowadays we have no mandatory censorship any longer.
استا إنزامي بس السيرشيبك إنزامية أو قيدوش أنا أو درنا رقابي وادي أوتونيا.
But the film companies or the cinemas, they have their own system. So they put 11 year or 15. Yeah. So, but it's not any mandatory thing. They do it of their own free will.
بحسب أنا أو سنسورانا تطبيقا رشاق فنيانا بضم هاي يعني عندش في بضم اختياري بدلينا لك رشاق فنيانا هربي له. So the second the second question is that before the government fund, what was the fund sources for supporting the industry of cinema?
It was just private investment.
أغلبه هو وبدنا كرتي تايبات بيش حكومتهم بابشتي سينما عندك بيش ويكا بابشتي بيت وبدنا لهم. What year the government start to support the cinema?
Beginning of the 60s.
And he also mentioned that the Seven Sin movie cost us in 1957 cost us $150,000 for producing. So it's a huge amount.
Oh, really? Interesting.
But it was totally. But I mean, svensk film industry who did it. I mean, they made a lot of films. So I mean, it's so they had a good turnover. So they had money to invest. They made a lot of cheap comedies that didn't cost this much, but attract a lot of audience.
عندك كوميديا كي نزني أنا ندرس بكر كخلقي كي زور تماشا بالله زور بعيش كي
My question is for Mr. Magnus. What are your plans for exchange of students between Sweden and Kurdistan so that they can study at your university? Planova chia و أرجوكين نابنا خطابين كردستان ألمانيا روبن سويدي و كردستان و خطابين كرد بشين لزانيجا و
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm very open to investigate if we can have a collaboration. That would be very interesting. We have many partner schools all over the world, and one part of my job is to visit these partner schools. And recently I was in Vietnam.